Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Happy Sunday. We are here with Walela Nehanda, the author of our July pick, Bless the Blood, a cancer memoir. Just a little intro about Walela. They are a cultural worker, poet, and debut author of Bless the Blood. They've been listed as part of Out Magazine's Class of 2020, consisting of 100 groundbreaking, ripple-inducing, and culture-shifting people in the nation, alongside the likes of Janelle Monáe and Andre Leon Talley. Like, hello. Walela has been featured in and written for publications such as Time, Self, The Cut, Nylon. They've performed, provided keynotes, and given workshops at various academic institutions. And in 2024, Walela was awarded the coveted Disability Futures Fellowship by the Ford and Mellon Foundations in partnership with United States artists. Walela, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to start out by saying thank you so much for writing this. Sapph-Lit has been so incredibly impacted by your work. I'm like getting goosebumps already. And it's been incredible to see the reactions and conversations that have started because of reading this book together as a community. So I just want to first ask, how are you doing? Like
Thank you.
mentally, physically, how are you?
I say this a lot. I'm like long day, long life of just like living under empire and then just finding what feels joyful and chill in the midst of that. So I actually feel quite resourced in a very beautiful way this morning. I'm just grateful to be here talking with y'all. How are you?
I'm okay. I've had a really social weekend, been finding a lot of joy. Went to the pool yesterday, had a little cookout, rode a horse yesterday. So finding those little childhood joy moments. What's bringing you joy right now?
Ooh, I would say, interestingly enough, like relationship anarchy, random, out of left field, I know. But I
Wait,
will
what?
I don't know, it's just like been such a fulfilling way of being clear about the relationships that I have in my life, of just like understanding even when I'm friends with someone, we are like locked in a lot of other ways. And how are we clear about, oh, we have a creative relationship, we have an intellectual relationship, we have a collab, we're comrades. Those are all like very deep layers of separate types of relating. And so just being clear with the people around me has been just so beautiful. And like there's a lot of levity in that.
I love
So
that. Yeah, fuck the relationship escalator. Fuck prioritizing romantic relationships over platonic ones. Absolutely. I love this. And congratulations on your debut. I would love to hear how the publishing process was for you.
I publishing is interesting just in the sense that anything that goes through institution is interesting. So like a
Mhm.
lot of times things that go through institution, I was not aware of how different like literature is compared to just like a writing community
Yeah.
that's just in LA. And I think oftentimes because literature posits itself as like, well, we are pushing forward culture in a very particular way. Um, I thought that there was probably going to be a bit more delicacy in that process, to be fully transparent. And so it's been an adjustment in the sense of just like realigning what my meaning for myself is as a writer. And to me, a writer is very different from an author. Like the author is the one that goes in and we write the book, etc. But what am I doing outside of publishing? And
Yeah.
so publishing my first book really allowed me to be a lot more clear in that. And I guess in my class consciousness as well, of understanding what is the role of like a diet celebrity author, what is the role of a celebrity author, what am I actually contributing to the canon? And so in it, despite it being a somewhat solitary process because I'd started writing in the midst of COVID,
Yeah.
of like lockdown, I just understand it was just a very deep learning process that I did in isolation that I will never do like that again. And I have said this a lot where I'm just like, this book is just an overshare party for just like, it's just, we were not thinking a lot because I didn't realize it was being published that way. I was not
That's
thinking.
everyone's debut. Every single author I talk to, they're like, yeah, the debut is the one that's way too personal, that has so much of our heart and souls in it. And then it's like fucked through capitalism and marketing, and no one is prepared for it. So you're not alone there.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like in that it just really called upon, I guess, the organizer brain inside me to be like, well, if I'm dissatisfied with just, and I'm not trying to necessarily change this institution because it exists for a very specific reason, then what is my job? So I think that's just been the most beautiful part about doing this book is I feel like I've also regained some of my autonomy that maybe I did feel like I lost just from just not being as informed as I would have liked to have been. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And I know that the writing and editing process for poetry and essays is so traditional to, or so different from traditional fiction and nonfiction. And I firmly maintain that a hybrid memoir is the gayest form of memoir, and I will be fighting for that till like the rest of my life.
Um,
I'd love to know how you compiled all of these pieces over the years and decide what goes where, like what made all of these individual poems and essays get this order, get this arc.
mm. I really appreciate that question. I would say hybrid memoir, just by base that it's non-normative, is very queer
Yeah.
because that's,
Oh,
you think of like queer theory, that's
yes.
where it's at. But it was such a spiritual process in a very fascinating way. I am not a writer that was trained in any way, shape of the word. I came up as a performance poet. So for me, it's all about creating feeling, not necessarily like a way that it makes sense craft or form wise, which I think hybrid memoir allows for me to play in that way. But I had a decent number of just journal entries. And so I had to go through all my journals and just highlight and put down, okay, maybe I'll make a poem out of this, or there are already poems done. And then I separated the book into three sections, and it didn't mean the book was going to be split up in that way. But for me, I had like these three themes that were guiding me. And so one of them was resurrection, another was baptism. I honestly cannot remember the other one. And I started putting pieces in alignment there because I had already said it's not going to be super in chronological order. And so then from that, I started stitching together these themes. And so that's why the book is really set up where something happens to me and oftentimes I go deep into my mind and I'm like juking it out and then I come back and I say something
Yeah.
because that is just like the genuine way that I process. So if anything, this book has surprised me in that now I'm writing my second book and I'm seeing I'm doing the same thing naturally. And I'm like, oh, so this is how I just do this. So that's yeah, it was a really fun process though. That was probably my favorite part of the book.
You're developing your own sense of craft then.
Yes. It
Yeah.
only makes sense to me and it's okay.
No, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So you mentioned resurrection and baptism, which is so interesting. I'm going to jump ahead to my question about the title because this book, Bless the Blood, as any religiously traumatized queer, me, um, us, but no, it's a reference to communion and the blood of Jesus Christ, whether that's figurative or literal, depending on how Catholic you are. We then in the middle-ish part of the book, we get to the poem titled Bless the Blood. And that's by far one of my favorites. I love the line, I am both ghostly and living, the youngest and oldest ancestor. Can you talk about why you chose this as the title poem? And I'd also love to know a bit about how cancer changed your relationship with religion. As a former religious kid myself, I'm so curious how these kind of life-altering events either strengthen or shatter one's faith.
Mm.
So would love for you to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, but wow. Beautiful questions. Bless the everyone always thinks it's like some larger story. I'm like, honestly, my editor picked it. I don't pick titles. I don't do that. Like any essay I've ever written anywhere, like the editor, like for Self or Time, I'll be like, can y'all just pick this? Because like I've done the writing. Like, yeah, y'all, this is what.
You
So
synthesize it, you make it marketing.
yeah, exactly. But it made sense ultimately. And initially, it was going to be invisible heavenly bodies, and it just did not necessarily make sense in the sense, this is Penguin, so it's like this isn't artsy necessarily. So I wound up really liking it because I didn't realize actually when I wrote the book, it was a very spiritual book. I did not think about that at all. And I think that's like one of the really cool, surprising things about writing is that themes will surprise you. And the more that you engage with your work, even after it's come out, there's so much more that I see now. But I think when it came to cancer, it was very earth shattering because cancer is deemed as inherently bad. And so you
Mm.
must have done something to have gotten cancer. And so that is already making me contend with the way in which I'm perceived far more deeply outside of just being like, all my intersections of identity. But it really made me, it's like one of the first poems I talk about God. God is a white man who is judgmental and like negligent. And it's in what is the poem? My mother and I signed the advance directive, and I say God is in a corner, puffing on a cigar in an easy chair, asking me how bad I want to stay or leave.
Oh,
And I really had to contend with my Judeo-Christian notion of Christianity and of God,
Yeah.
spirituality. And I was seeing that the old stories that previously worked for me were no longer hitting. And so in that, I think I've learned this actually like this summer of what my process was for that. But when I got diagnosed, my mother was very clear with me that I had to know my illness as well as or better than the doctors. And that was a type of armoring against an institution that is not interested in my well-being. And
Yeah.
I think about that a lot for people who are incarcerated, for disabled people, and for houseless people. Like these are the people that are on the fringe of society where you are lucky if you survive. And so, in having to communicate in that language, there's an easy way to lose yourself. And so, in that time frame, I was sort of armoring myself without realizing it with new methods of knowing. And so one of them was studying the Black radical tradition. I just started getting involved in organizing. So I was reading a lot of like Assata Shakur, Kwame Ture, Safia Bukhari, Kamasi Balagoon. So it was just like that was just very helpful of just showing me how ridiculous the medical institution was. And so that was helpful, but then also tracing my own genealogy
Yeah.
because I was getting stories of ancestors and having symbolism in my life that was already there, making spiritual meaning. And I think those moments when you can bring, I forgot what philosopher was talking about this, but when you can bring the spiritual into the corporal, it really shifts people. And so I was seeing, oh, maybe whatever this spirituality is, it exists outside of Christianity. It exists outside of this white God. And I
Yeah.
think about the book, we just start seeing that, like, I'm not even talking, I say God is spirit. I start changing how I talk about things because it was literally my relationship to practicing prayer, my relationship to practicing with my ancestors. Who do I turn to? How do I turn away from my mother's preconceived notions of what she believes spirituality should be? And I think a lot of this actually, with spirituality, especially in Los Angeles, is class aspirations for Black people because a lot of us come from the South and then we come over to the North or to the West
Yeah.
and we're not doing that country shit. And it's like, well, that country shit actually has a ton of spiritual
It
potency.
does. Yeah.
Largely, yeah, largely because churches in the South, they come from the plantation. The plantation, we couldn't practice Ifa, we couldn't practice Lusimi, we couldn't practice Obi. And so then we had to Trojan horse it through Christianity. And that's how we have a lot of practices like hoodoo. And
Mhm.
so I think I was listening to Dr. Nicole Rouse talk about this, but hoodoo is a renegotiation with the land and the people and the community that you're in. And so when you go through something like cancer, you are renegotiating with all of those things alongside other people. And so I think if anything, it was just a beautiful spiritual initiation. And I think also what's kind of funny is I see where one of the loopholes is in the book, where at the end I say, like, you have to close up loopholes by giving very specific prayers. And I think one of my ways that I kind of critique myself is like, that's really funny that you thought you could play God. Because of course, afterwards, which I don't write about in the book, my recovery was quite difficult. Like my recovery, it was a very easy transplant. It was the easiest one they had ever seen. It was nuts. But that part, and it's funny how the universe works, is like, if you really think you can play us, you're going to learn. And so it has also reinvigorated my relationship to spirituality. It's just a continual relationship because I also think a lot of our relationships with God and with our ancestors is rooted in grief. And so my relationship to grief is always changing. And writing this book and going through cancer, but also going beyond those things. And I think all of us have those moments where it's like, I'm never going to be the same again. That is like reinvigorated and made me, I guess, compelled to understand that spirituality is something that we're really deeply deprived in. And that's why I do really love this book, because I think it's a guidepost for anybody that's gone through trauma.
Heard. Heard. No, I love that so much. And I think the distinction between spirituality and being religious
Yeah.
is so, so important. And I mean, Judeo-Christianity is so white, patriarchal, and not reciprocal. Like I think spirituality is like really rooted in reciprocity and community and
Yeah.
coming together, and it's more horizontal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree too. And I think it's very Manichaean. And I think when I had just started reading Fanon in like 2018, so about or 2017, so about a year into my diagnosis, Fanon talks about this concept of just like the good and evil, light and dark of spirituality, of religion is actually really damaging for colonized people in particular. Because when you think about who is posited, a lot of like the logic, like Western epistemology and like ideological frameworks and logic and meaning making is rooted in like Judeo-Christian thoughts. and the way in which it's like, this is light, this is dark. I don't understand this. And it's like creating differentiation, but for the sake of separation of
Mhm.
like, well, I'm this, I'm a sinner, you're this, I'm not this, you're that, right?
Yeah.
And we see this especially with like British colonization. We see this where the colonizer comes and observes. I think this was in Sharonda J. Brown's book, where they talk about a colonizer comes and observes indigenous people and is like, well, these people eat whenever they want, and I eat 3 times a day. That's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's just, why did we have to do that? And I think
This
also it's,
capital time.
yes, and it's
Yes.
just like, it's so interesting to me the way in which religion actually has really informed a lot of capitalism, unfortunately, in the United
Unfortunately,
States.
so fucking unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially here. Um, and beyond your medical experience in this book and, really what is the heart of this book, there's all these themes of family relationships. You describe going through an abusive relationship, generational trauma, and how your cancer diagnosis impacts those around you. And you really show it's not this kind of like insular experience. Um, I'd love to know how you took care of yourself while writing this book. And
I
and and how you navigated any reactions from those relationships while writing this book. You're like, I didn't.
yeah, yeah. I was about to say that debut process is just
Yeah.
it's a
Thrown to
canon
the
event.
fire.
Yeah, it's a canon event. No one can interfere, and it makes me take my work with artists now so much more seriously in the sense that there is something that is for some reason inherent to artists in the creative process where we think it's okay to let them create in despair and not care about their wellness. And I think that is obviously, these are some institutional failures, but they're also communal failures in certain ways, obviously. And so that is I had talked with my homeboy recently, and I was like, we both were on gin throughout 2 separate projects that we had done. And it's like, if you do that as any type of writer, you're an AA afterwards. Like it was so serious. It's a journey. It is a journey. It's unnecessary. And so but also necessary. And so I was really again isolated just because of lockdown and the
Yeah.
pandemic, and because I was recovering from a stem cell transplant. And I also was navigating 2 relationships that I think one was with like a former friend of mine, another one was my ex. And it was just, I think just, just navigating like life alongside other people while we all are significantly traumatized is just very difficult. And so now that I'm older, I have a lot more like compassion for that. And
Yeah.
I think, I talked with my mom, I remember, about like, do you want to read this book? Like, I'm just going to let you know, like, I am honest about our relationship, but it's okay. And she was like, nah, not right now. But she just appreciated that I actually came to her, because I think something coming up in slam poetry, we will eviscerate someone and not think of, because that's just community. You just do it and you get over it. It's like the same thing that you do in like a rap battle. And so the thing about literature, it feels a bit more eternal in that way. And it's an indication of what society and culture was like in the future. So taking that into account made me actually handle everyone with a lot of grace, because I think that we reduce complexity very quickly. Just again, to say someone's all bad and all good. I don't think there's a single likable person really in my book, including me. And I think that's very important for us to
That
contend.
makes it a good book, frankly, in my opinion.
I appreciate that. But I think also just what I really wanted to convey is just how epigenetically and intergenerationally we have been consistently under resourced to navigate capitalism, and specifically to navigate illness, especially because illness puts you on a fringe where your labor is not considered productive. And my mom also grew up disabled, and just having family where it's like, this is a bit of a trip to be the first person in my family that can have enough time to sit up and think about these relationships.
Yeah.
Um, and I really wanted to show that like abuse and harm, if you're here, you're capable and you can love somebody. But if you are not sitting with that, it is very easy to reproduce that, and you can still love those people, which is not to excuse anything, right? But I think in a time where we do not know how to have conflict with each other, going through something like cancer and showing that to a younger person so that they don't feel like crazy and gaslit through what they're going through, and be clear, but also an attempt to provide resources through the book of just like how to talk, and even putting stuff from like my therapist in there was very important to me. So it's just like, you don't have to navigate this alone. I always think about like a book as a place of escape. And as a child, especially growing up in an abusive environment, books were that. And so what would it be like to have a kid who was like me, being reassured through an avenue that's unexpected. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I so appreciate that because we were talking in our Discord, and one of the questions that came up was, why is this young adult? Because we don't read a lot of young adult in
I
Sapph-Lit.
love young adult.
And, this is I love young adult. And this is Penguin Teen, it's young adult specifically, and you mentioned this kind of being a companion for those kids going through something that is similar to what you went through and not feeling alone. And in the beginning of the book, you have a poem called This Here Ain't a John Green Novel. And as a former 2012 Tumblr devotee, John Green
Same.
was a huge part of my young adult reading. The Fault in Our Stars came out my freshman year of high school, and I so distinctly remember my librarian very purposefully giving it to me to read. And then, of course, the movie came out, all bets were off. That was like what dominated my high school experience pretty much.
Yeah.
Can you share your thoughts on that franchise and why was it important for you to include that like so strongly in the book?
Yeah. I think it's important to name people that are benefiting from specific cultural things and they don't have a relationship to it. I am aware that like Hank Green has been going through cancer, so I am like, okay,
But
maybe now,
that's after the fact.
right? And it's like, okay, tight. But I think for me, my first romantic film I ever saw as a child was A Walk to Remember, which is crazy because Jamie Sullivan gets leukemia, right? To say it's a canon event for me. I just was like, oh my God, be careful what you call in because I was like, I just want that. Be careful what you wish for. In short, it's
What?
so because the
So
shit did not go like
goofy.
that. I think what's very interesting about media representation of cancer, it is so deeply romanticized, it just reduces it to nothing. And cancer is so much more than that, but I think illness and disability is so much more than that because I think of Bayo Kamalafe talking about disability as this site of possibility of what it means to go beyond a fringe and how do we exist in survival together. I think we can learn a lot from disabled people. And so it felt like every time I saw a cancer patient in a film, they were this catalyst for the partner to understand themselves better. And so we are almost this cost for people around us to do better. And I was like, this is so much more nuanced than that. And a lot of us actually do not feel this way. So this is not even an accurate representation of this. I have critiques of representation of how still I think when we call for like Black and disabled representation, like what are we actually asking for, right? Just by virtue that I'm this doesn't mean that I am in actual solidarity with people. But I think like having something so deeply removed from reality, especially in like major media, makes me question why does media want to do that, especially when media acts as an arm of empire. And so for me, I think it's very important to then name what is to me a literary enemy, right? I'm like, nah, that's not how that goes. And like you have me and a lot of people fucked up. I will say John Green is a great writer. I think like all of those things, right? And I see why he's so like, relevant to us because I too was on Tumblr. I too was at the movie theater. I too. And then I was like, you have me bent. Um, so yeah, I think for me it was very important to be clear with people to not have any expectation of me and of this trope because it's already a trope. And so I think about when things are up in a kind of arena of spectacle, if I'm about to be up in there, I have to differentiate that this is not Nicholas Sparks. This is very real. And I think it's very important for us to consider what it means to witness a cancer patient as opposed to turning a cancer patient into a moral hero's journey trope.
I love that. I love it so much. I talked about this in a reel that I posted. But when I first picked up your book and I read it, I was at my parents' house and it like hit me so hard. I read it out loud to my dad, who had cancer a few years ago. He's okay now, but grew up chronically ill, is still chronically ill, and has been in and out of hospitals my entire life. I read it out loud to him, and he does not really talk very much. He was just like, fuck. And he got a little teary. And this is like a 70-year-old white man. And he was just like, just so moved by it. And I'm gonna give him like my copy when I see him next so he can experience it too. But it
Oh.
it was such a like profound opening to a memoir that I hadn't seen in a while, so I had to talk about it. But tell me more about like the young adult designation, because I'm like it is, you reference it a lot. I see in the poems, in the essays, like you make these kind of cultural references and it's a very intertextual and you have further reading at the end. And, I kind of see this as like the modern day, and I know this was kind of your intention, like the modern day cancer journals by Audre Lorde. So yeah, just talk a little bit about like why, like what you want your reader to, take away from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I saw that critique a lot early on. You read the Goodreads for 5 seconds, you're like, okay, never mind, like
No,
whatever.
you got to stay off there.
I
That's not your
I think
business.
I'm secure enough to be like, this is just interesting. Like I like to take the temperature
That's fair.
because it tells me more about where I need to sharpen my spear as a writer in a particular way. So it's more just like this is data collection hours as like the scientist that I am. But I will say I found it quite shocking that people did not understand why that'd be for young adults because I work with a lot of youth and just seeing that they are exposed to far more in the world than we ever were because the internet is a presence in their lives. It's not a destination. And so a lot of us grew up having to go on the internet around our parents. We did
Mhm.
not grow up with social media. We did not grow up with TikTok. Like, I mean, even this evolution of social media from Tumblr and forums, right, all the way into Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok is this global app that has a very similar impact that I would say that like the 70s had with like the TV and like Nam, like when like that's known as like the global village generation. I think about that a lot with like these kids and like a genocide. It's
Yeah.
like this is a very cyclical thing, and so for me, I think it is a disservice to infantilize younger people as if they are not experiencing some of the worst shit in this world, because everything about being a child is being forced to adhere. Everything is about assimilation. And I think about Ayanna Goodfellow, who I wrote the foreword for their book, Innocence and Corruption, which is like a youth liberation theory book. I think Ayanna is one of the most brilliant theorists that we have that is pushing beyond just Marx and whatever, but is saying, how do we actually apply this to younger people? And so when working with Ayanna, I just really understood that Ayanna came across Audre Lorde at like 14 years old. I came across Audre Lorde at 24. So
Mhm.
it's like these kids are having a 10-year acceleration of what they're coming into contact with, which is interesting. Obviously, when we're talking about the internet and algorithms and the way in which things are intentionally censored now from kids and what are they actually being shown. And so if I'm going to be in this literary canon in a particular way, how do I leverage that to where I'm actually pushing a needle? And for me, young people going through cancer, again, if all they're getting is this romanticized nonsense, it was very important for me to speak directly to them because I don't think they had that. In the same way that when I was 23, I didn't have any books like that for myself, and it was Audre Lorde who was that for me. And Audrey was 20 years my senior when she gets diagnosed. It's a very different experience to be 23, which is closer to 18, which is closer to 15, than it is to be 43 talking to a 23-year-old. So I saw it as how do I improve upon this genre that I'm in? And especially being in, to me, the lineage I belong to is that of Audre Lorde, is that of June Jordan, Lucille Clifton. These are all women who had cancer. And so, what does it look like to sit with their work and synthesize that? And I think young adult is a beautiful genre. My friend Safia Lilio, I think it's a beautiful way to translate. I think if we are poets, part of our job is being a translator. And so, for me, how do I synthesize all the media that I grew up around? How I synthesize the places that I've been? I think those references are very important for young people because then they can go further. And so I wonder how we can present curriculum and study in a way that feels different, where it's actually enjoyable. So if anyone wants to dig into like Megan Thee Stallion or Bell Hooks or Octavia Butler, I'm putting them on into all the things that when I was their age influenced me, and that when I am in my 20s is influencing me. And if you want to read more, there's this. But I want it to function more than just a memoir. I want it to be a guide where, in 10 years, I think about All About Love. I read that book 5 different times at different points in my life, different book every
Every
time.
time.
And I just want it to be that. And I think that's like where, I put myself also in Bell Hooks's lineage in that way. Um, but yeah, I think like, yeah, young people are far, far more capable than we give them credit for. And I just really wanted to just do something for them in that way because they are the ones who hold the line for us as well. As now that I'm older, I hold myself to them where I'm like, okay, this is what y'all are angry about. Then I need to go do what I need to do to support y'all through that, which is something I didn't have when I was their age as well. So,
I love that so much. And I also like I revisited young adult as an adult through queer literature
yes.
because I, growing up, had no queer literature in the young adult sense. Like,
Yes.
and I think it prevents people from really exploring and discovering lives that are possible outside of what they are raised within, and identities and, new experiences. And I think like the reason I feel like you get this question a lot is because young adult, at least in my view, is kind of perceived in the media as this like, we must protect the children and reduce it down and simplify it. And, you know, in the fiction genre and like the romance genre, young adult is the one without sex. It's the one without violence. It's the one without anything that's like too rough around the edges. It's like the kind of feel good genre.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's young adult is the universal genre in the sense that like any, the literacy rate in the United States is honestly not able to even keep up with YA, right? Because like everyone is their reading level is below a sixth grader, right? I think about that where I'm like, if I want to communicate a universal experience like cancer and I want anyone to be able to read this, young adult is actually the perfect genre for me in that way. I also just do not think it does us there's a specific type of sedating that happens when you do not tell kids what's going on in the world and then they're confused when their exterior circumstances are not matching what they're reading and consuming and thinking about, and we have enough of that happening where I think it is the duty of a writer, maybe not an author but a writer, to provide new language, new terms, new concepts, and new ways of thinking and relating. Like that is just, at least that's what I see my job for my generation is. And so I
Yeah.
think it would be interesting if a lot of us took that to task a bit more. Because yeah, I just don't believe in adhering to like that within institution, especially under this administration where it's just like they want to call everything that's for like, young queer people pornographic. And it's just like,
Literally.
is it, and it's just like, okay, that's really silly. Because if you actually read the work, it's actually, if I think anything, helping people return to themselves and have to consider under empire, why is that so threatening?
Yeah.
Makes
No,
sense realizing.
I mean, I was a gender and sexuality studies major, if you can't tell. And um I had this wonderful professor and Anne Pellegrini, and she really talked a lot about how there's constantly like this fear mongering around like we have to protect the children. But it's like you're not protecting the children. You're creating a world for them that is going to constantly traumatize them, and then you're not giving them the tools and the resources to like cope with that in a healthy way that's like preparing them to face what you're forcing them to face.
Yeah.
So yeah, you gave them a tool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, the other thing I have to talk about, I have to talk about Luigi Mangione. Um, because you talk about insurance and the healthcare system,
Um,
and I'm in New York City. We talked about this before everyone got on. I just need to know your reaction to the whole thing because I currently pay over $1,000 a month for health insurance and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. I could go on, but I won't because it's a long saga. And I'd love to know your little thoughts and reactions to my Italian brother.
mm. I think in desperate times call for desperate measures. And I think this is, if anything, an indication of the temperature that is outside of what happens when a more than capable state is refusing to care for anyone. I think it's very interesting when white men are experiencing that, right? Like, I think that shares a lot actually of like, this is a class thing. This is about the
Yeah.
ruling class being able to have access to healthcare. It's like what I say in the book, health is wealth, which means white and rich. Rich is very clear in that as well. But if anything, when I was writing the book, I was really thinking about John Q, which is a film with Denzel Washington in it,
Yeah.
where his son needs a heart transplant. And a lot of Black people who are on transplant registries, we do not get the care that we need. We wind up not being able to receive the organ or the stem cell transplant, right? By virtue of just there are not enough of us in the registry. By
Mm.
virtue that there are not enough Black people who are educated about this. I have my own thoughts about that as a whole, but John Q was actually what inspired me more than anything. And so I felt like it was a John Q moment because basically Denzel Washington's character holds up a hospital and he takes everyone hostage. And he's actually like, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's not really interested in that, but he's so angry and he's so sad and he's so desperate because he's dealing with insurance. He's dealing with these transplant coordinators. He's dealing with so many people that fundamentally do not care whether or not his son lives or dies. And that is his whole world. And so you really get into the mind of someone and why they're doing something like that. And to me, it just reminded me of that film in that way.
I need
Um,
to rewatch that now because
so good. It's so good. If I ever do an
Denzel's
adaptation
so
of my
good.
book, yeah, if I ever do an adaptation of my book, I'm like, well, and I'm kind of trying to start that process right now. And I'm like, John Q is a comp, like just forever. Desperate times, man. It did like these. I think it's like a very almost human expression of the self, honestly. Um, but
Yeah,
I'm also like very much of a by any means necessary shorty. So like,
yeah. Just
yeah,
I love him. Um,
yeah,
that as an aside, that's like a little hee hee ha ha question.
yeah.
But no, you mentioned John Q and you talk about Grey's Anatomy and watching Grey's Anatomy in recovery. I'm so curious, have you watched The Pit?
No, what is that?
Okay, it's on
Okay,
HBO and
okay.
it's did you ever watch ER?
No.
Okay, so ER is like the OG Grey's Anatomy, and Noah Wyle plays like a young hot doc, and then the pit is him grown with a beard, and he's like the jaded ER like resident.
Oh, oh.
And it takes place like over one day. Each episode is 1 hour in the ER. I'm just gonna leave that with
Oh.
you. DM
Think
me when you're done. And I highly
typing into my
recommend.
memory,
Yeah.
pressing send. Wow.
Yeah. Anywho, I think it's safe to say that everyone knows someone who has had cancer. And you talk about in your book how the word cancer has kind of taken on a life of its own. And I know sharing experiences is how people relate to each other at the end of the day to demonstrate that they understand. But I imagine you've heard, like, oh, my uncle has cancer. Oh, my grandma has cancer. When you talk about your story, you talk about your book. And, those experiences could and probably are worlds away of what you experience because cancer itself is so varied and patient treatment in this country is so varied. And, this is a cancer memoir, really specific, it gets into medical racism. And I guess my question is like, what do you want people to get out of your book the most? If like someone knows nothing about you, maybe they're a kid, maybe they're an adult, just like the average person that you can imagine picking this up not knowing anything, what do you want them to kind of take away
Mhm.
from this most?
I was thinking about Lucille Clifton recently, and there's this line in a poem. It's called After Kent State, and it's talking about like, white death, empire, etc. But what she says at the end is step into the black and live. And I think, if anything, I just want people to understand that even in navigating some of the worst things in your life, you have to step into it at some point and participate. Um, and I think, if anything, it is a trial of survival. And I think I've really seen this year in particular, not the first year it came out, but this year especially, is that there is something really beautiful where people are contending with the state of the world right now and understanding I don't know if I can adhere to this. I don't know if this is actually going to help me in my long term endeavor for just self determination, which is ultimately freedom. And I think that my book provides an outline in a way that a lot of us, I've been saying this recently. I think about Susan Sontag a lot. He talks about the kingdom of the well and the kingdom of the
Yeah.
ill. Survivorship is very interesting because the kingdom of the well, you leave it when you go, you get cancer and you go there, you go to the kingdom of the ill. And then
Yeah.
they tell you the whole time in the kingdom of the ill, they're like, you're going to be fine. You can just walk back over there when you're finished and you're going to be good. And
Mhm.
so I did my stem cell transplant and I pull back up to the kingdom of the well. And they were like, you look different. That's
Yeah.
funny.
They're like, go back.
Yeah. And then you go back to the kingdom of the ill and they're like, well, you're a survivor. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? And so then there's this vast, unsafe, unknown outside that now you have to wander in.
Yeah.
And I resonated with that as a survivor of that and domestic violence.
Mm.
That is a very, when I was surviving those two things at the same time, I was like, why are these the same? Like, why? And I think surviving empire, of course, you show the flaws in it. You show the flaws in the kingdom, in the castle. So they're not going to let you back in as easily. They're like, no, 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 we don't even have the
Go to
resources.
purgatory. If we're
Yeah,
keeping the religious imagery,
yeah,
you're in purgatory.
yeah, you're supposed to be some type of dead in the liminal space, right? And I think a lot of us are having that moment as a whole in different ways.
Yeah.
That cancer and disability is actually a very useful tool, not as a metaphor necessarily, but as a means of relating. And I think for a lot of people, they're contending with, damn, I don't want to go into institution. I don't want to go into empire. I don't want to do these things. And it's like, well, then you have to reckon with nothing is safe.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to be safe. And so, where do we go now? If I'm just sitting out in the wild with my walking stick, will you pull up with me and will we try to make something new?
I love
And I think that was me attempting to labor that, I think, a bit more privately and in my more like familial and whatever relationships. And now in survivorship, it's like my larger community. I've been really sitting with what are the questions that we can try to answer alongside each other, because theory is great, praxis is better. And so that, if anything, is like what I hope for this book now, which is very different than when it came out, even.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's like you're kind of describing like a point of no return. I kind
Yes.
of see it's like post enlightenment and like reckoning in a way.
But we are feeling,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, is there a reaction from a reader who's like reached out to you that stood out to you?
Ooh. I talked about this one most recently, so maybe I'll just say that. But when I did the Blue Stockings reading in New York,
Love Blue Stockings.
yeah, because also the shorties that like run that, like they'd
Oh
been
yeah.
following me since they were younger. And I was like, how old are you? Like that was just a whole moment where I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I think if anything, because again, writing through cancer, and cancer is just such an insular experience, I didn't really get to see my impact on other people. That reading that the people that showed up, these were people that I went to NYU for one semester. I have friends that live in New York that I haven't seen since high school. There were just a lot of moments where I was like, whoa, my worlds are colliding in so many different ways. And just like when people sit up and tell me, like, you influence the way that I think. And I'm like, okay, you translated it. I'm not saying anything new, truly. But like, thank you, because it does make it worthwhile for me. And I think on social media, you just don't get that in the same way as in person.
Yeah.
So that was just a really, it was just like the bookstore folks. And then it was like Jez, who like, I love Jez dearly. And it was just really cool to just have everything happen at once. Cause it's like, damn, like I really do this. But I think a lot of us who are authors, we just act like we don't. So that was probably my favorite reading that I did and just experience.
Oh my God, I love that. I also went to NYU. Um,
Really? What
yeah.
school?
I was in College of Arts and Sciences under social and cultural analysis for gender and sexuality studies, but then I also minored in art history and MCC at Steinhardt, so like media
Ooh,
communications. Yeah.
a lot. I was at Gallatin
Ah,
for
that
last.
makes sense.
Yeah, everyone says that. I'm like, and I went to a school called Crossroads in elementary. It's very much a Gallatin. So
I love that. I love that. Okay, what is next? Tell us what you're working on. What are you excited about?
yeah, I've been transitioning some. I think being an author is tight, but I just like I think I've been contending with authorship as a form of like property owning
Mm,
and versus being a tradesman and being a writer. And so what does that look like? And I think I've just been really rooted in my community. I'm back involved with an organization that frankly, if I wasn't going to their meetings, I don't think this book would have been written, called Aim for the Heart. But specifically, I've been going to this thing called Mike Sessions, which has just been really cool. Um, but it's Aim for the Heart does a lot of programming with like people who are incarcerated and people who are in schools, like students, and it's a emotional literacy programming. And so I grew up going to these workshops every Monday where we get a topic and then we write to the topic, and we all are artists just kind of fumbling and failing in front of each other, which I think in art you're expected to come fully
that's what
realized.
it is.
Yeah, but I think in a lot of art spaces, especially in LA, you're expected to show up just realized. I'm like, we can't do that.
Not
I,
realistic.
I need to be able to fail. So it's just been really beautiful doing that. I am getting involved in like artist wellness and development in the sense of just what is it, again, what I learned from publishing. How do I work with musicians, with poets to really have them publish and share on their own terms? Because I do think publication, I do think distribution is a type of grief ritual. I went to this retreat last year with Joshua Myers. He's a professor at Howard, and he was talking about publication as a death of sorts. And so, what does that ritual process look like while an artist is doing and making their work, so that we have an archive for them and how
Yeah.
to work through that? So, I've been working with a couple of my friends on just like how to do that with the artists that we know. And then I am currently working on my second book, which is more so about media. It's meant to be about like Black people media growing up in Los Angeles, kind of like similar to like how Hanif Abdurraqib writes about like Cleveland and pop culture and all of that in Ohio, but also it meaning to be a type of parenting book as well, where parents are being more conscientious of how to consume media alongside their children. Because I think a lot of people who are parents now, I'm like, you were on Tumblr with me. You have a very deep relationship to media that's personal, that you actually do understand with your kid. And so when you just put a screen in front of them, what is on the screen, you know, and it doesn't have to be anything that's like super educational and making these kids become, you know, assimilated into whatever white culture, but more so just like, what does it look like to do media deep dives together? What does it mean? Like, I think that's really beautiful forms of sharing and also education. So I'm said some of it to my agent. So we'll see. I am very, this is the first time in like 5 years. I'm like, okay, I think I have something to say, and it would be an
I love
adult.
that.
So that will
Love
be
that.
interesting.
Oh, I
Yeah.
can't wait to read it whenever it enters the world in whatever form it is.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to go into the rapid fire round. If anyone on the call has questions for Walela, put them in the chat and we will ask them at the end. All right, what are you currently reading?
Two books. Usually I'm reading seven, and I am reading seven, but I'm just gonna do
So
two.
me.
Yeah, so I have to because
I'm a
it's
mood
a
reader.
playlist, and it's a playlist. They all somehow feed into each other. It's a thing. I just a week thing.
Duality. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
But I am currently reading The Carceral Archive, Against the Carceral Archive by Damien Sojourner, which
Mhm.
is about the Southern California Library and Fugitive Archives. I am currently reading All This Safety is Killing Us, which is this group of healing justice practitioners and doctors and community organizers in Los Angeles detailing the work they've done in the last 5 years in particular in response to COVID and health injustice. And so that is really encouraging for me to read. And it also has a abolitionist framework. So seeing that applied in health has just been amazing. Of Black Study by Joshua Myers, which is just this updating of Black radical theorists of who we need to be looking to. So I've been really sitting with Cedric Robinson lately from that. And then I am also reading, let me look right now. We Will Return in the Whirlwind, which is a anthology basically of Black radical organizations from 1960 to 1975.
Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah. What are
I
you reading right now?
well, I finished your book this morning.
You.
Um, and what am I reading? I'm reading this sapphic cowgirl smut romance that's
Ooh.
like historical vibes that someone in Sapph-Lit recommended to me called Bloomtown. I'm listening to Braiding Sweetgrass on audio. And also on audio, my partner and I are on the third Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Hey,
So
nice.
like really runs the gamut,
Yeah, yeah, which we need.
which we need and we deserve. Okay, what is a book that you recommend everyone to read? Like, what's the book you recommend most out of
Mm.
everything?
Book I recommend most. What is it? What has it been lately? I feel like, see, this is when I need my friends because, like, I know that I bother them with these things. I think I've actually been really talking about Against the Carceral Archive by Damien Sojourner.
Okay, noted. Is there a book coming out soon that you're excited to read? Anything like on the horizon from friends of yours or like on like fiction you're excited about?
See, I need to get in my fiction bag because, like, I'm very like nostalgic with fiction. I'll be up in the YA super deep because that's
I
just
love
like,
that.
uh, um, I don't know actually because I've been really not paying attention, which I like to be surprised. So not really, but I think that's like when people just send me stuff, I'll read it. The only one I can think of right now is The Quiet Ear by Raymond Antrobus because it is about deafness and the performance of the deaf Black body. That there is an interesting kind of perspective that Raymond has that I think is really useful for right now. That's like the main one. I think that's coming out in like a couple weeks, but yeah.
Nice. I'll email you some of my Sapph-Lit fiction favorites for
Thank you.
when
I
you want to get back into your fiction bag.
Yes, thank you. I know I deeply need to. I'm like, I am slacking so hard right now,
No, but
especially like my queer literature.
you talk about books being an escape, and like sometimes we need that little bit of levity to reset our brains in a
You know
sense.
what? One of my friends actually gave me this book just as a random aside, but this
Oh,
is how
we
you
read that one. This is how you lose the time war. It's so
yeah.
good.
No, they're eating down with this.
I didn't understand any of it until like the last quarter of it where I was like, "Oh, this is what's happening."
Yeah.
And then I just like burst into tears and like cried the rest of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is my friend Aisha let me borrow this and it's phenomenal. So,
Beautiful. Yeah, that was such a good one. Oh my gosh. If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be? And it can be a dinner party. So if you want people in conversation with one another.
oh God. And see, I'm a facilitator, so I would just be like, oh, oh, I would love to meet Robert F. Williams and Malcolm X in one place. Robert F. Williams was like the original Malcolm X, actually, and not a lot of people know that. I think I'd love to have dinner with Tupac. I would also love to have dinner with Audrey.
Yes, Audrey. I
Who's
think
Jordan?
Audrey is the most common answer for this question when I
It was
ask people.
interesting because also, okay, it was funny because like my friends, I kept being like, I was like very much resonating with Audrey Lorde, and a lot of my friends were like, June Jordan, you
Jean
should.
Jordan.
And it was just funny because like I think they were trying to be like, no, you're more like June, actually. You're not. And I was like, and it's true, actually, politically. When I read Survival as a Promise by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, which is a beautiful autobiography of Audre Lorde, but it's just done with so much care and really taking Audrey to task in certain ways that I think we do not need to pedestalize anyone right now, but also really humanizing her. And it was so beautiful. But then, yeah, even reading that, I was like, oh no, I am a bit more like June. So I think actually I would want to meet June, Audrey, Lucille. I think, oh, James Baldwin, who just celebrated, like we just, birthday was recently, right? But I think just people who have just genuinely impacted me in like literature and music.
Yeah.
Those are the two ways I've always understood myself. And then I think also my former friend Tanya Ingram, who had passed away in 2022, and she had passed away because she needed a kidney transplant. And I just always think about like what those like last conversations could have been like. And so I think those are really, and just even being able to see Tanya maybe interact with those people would be really beautiful.
I
But
love this dinner party. Do you have a favorite James Baldwin?
yo, you know what? I actually do. I really love Giovanni's Room. Like that is like I read that in New Orleans and it just did something to me. And if I ever, ever, ever have the time and resources, I would want to make a play out of Giovanni's Room in Los Angeles. I would love to do that and have just like an artist kind of similar to like Serpent with Feet do the like what's the word, the composition of like
Yeah.
musical inside it and having it be restructured as like poems. Like I love James Baldwin's work in that way because they feel like plays to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that so much. Oh my
What
God.
is you have a favorite book?
Fire next time.
Okay.
Fire next time. Yeah, that's the one I read most recently. And I read Giovanni's Room several years ago, but Fire Next Time, it left like such an impression on me. I think
Yeah,
that's one that I'm like giving out to friends who.
yeah. That book healed me after I wrote my book because I think there's
Oh my
just
God, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the whole thing about like love that he writes to like his nephew or just like where he's talking about like he shook the chains and they fell about like Babylon. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just very.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a favorite queer movie or TV show?
This is gonna be real basic, but I'm just gonna say the first things that come to my mind because again,
As you should.
atypical. Because it's the neurodivergence plus and I love Bridget Lundy Payne. Like Bridget is so fucking cool too, just as a person, like just as a like outside of just like this acting role as Casey. I'm just like, you're tight. Like you just do really cool
We
things.
have some atypical love in the chat too, Carissa. No, the neurodivergent queer media
Need it.
is superior.
Yeah, need it. And that's how I realized myself actually, because I was watching Atypical. I was like,
Oh.
there's a lot of things being said here.
Yes. No, TikTok read me to filth about being autistic. So that was my journey.
It's my journey as well. I was like, wait, oh. And then I remember my cancer center, they had done this like they have like a survivorship program where they like just kind of keep up with survivors to see if our health outcomes are related to our cancer diagnoses, right? And for some reason, I just did something like related to my brain. I was doing all these tests and whatever, and the person's like, I'm not going to formally diagnose you, but have you considered that you're autistic? And I was like, you know what? No,
No,
but yes.
okay. So I was talking about this with my friend who's also autistic, and I think so many women or people raised and socialized as women are diagnosed so much later in life because so used to masking and like, all of this stuff. But like getting a formal diagnosis puts you lower on the organ like recipient list.
Really.
Yeah.
There's also, I
My
think,
friend told me.
yeah, I think like a lot of times with like I think about this a lot of just these opportunities to take away someone's agency. Sometimes diagnosis does that.
Mm.
And diagnosis is a type of sometimes you can be captured when you're diagnosed. I think about that.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, I know this thing about me. I don't need to know anything else. I just know I need to learn how to regulate and resource myself and just be around other people
No,
like
it's
I
like
really
you're learning new coping mechanisms and emotional regulation and how to approach like social situations. But
yeah.
like my doctor doesn't need to know this about me. That's not their business because it's not
And
affecting when you like, I don't know, look down my throat or whatever the fuck.
yeah. I think
Um,
learning discernment with doctors is very important because a lot of times these are opportunities where they can act like cops. And they are cops, like they are state sanctioned agents in a particular way. And I think about that, like social work in hospitals is oftentimes like that is the quickest I'll get in front of a cop. And I'm like, so learning what that is and how to resource that outside of institution has just been so pivotal for me because yeah, I'm not about to be put on a conservatorship. Absolutely no. No, the fuck I look like. Don't do
Free
that.
Britney.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And then lastly, favorite queer influencer or celebrity or like anything on social to follow.
Oh, dude, I would just say go through my following list, but I think just I have just people that I just naturally am in community with where I'm like they're phenomenal. I would say, you know what? I would say follow. Let me get it real quick because I have to. My recall is, on its own journey.
Oh, good.
But let me get it. There is my friends run this really cool, like kind of meme page, but also it's like visual and design is divination, but it's portal underscore archive dot web.
Portal or archive. Oh, found it.
Yeah, I that's like one of my favorite pages. And also I like know these people and they're just really amazing. They're designers,
Okay.
artists, archivists, two Kuwaiti queers, just like
This
love them.
is literally me.
Yes, see it, love them down. But I just really love what they're trying to do with like
Mhm.
memes and just ways to communicate that maybe just don't look traditional and like super high art, but it is. Like what are these things?
Yeah.
So I would yeah, that's mine.
No, I think the like Y2K early 2000s like Microsoft Paint aesthetic has a purpose.
I think about this a lot when things are getting like aestheticized and turned into core super heavily. It's like, well, then how do we interact with that then? Because we
Especially
still
with
have
like AI and everything and like the kind of like weird AI like airbrushed do you know what I mean? Like
I know it's
ugh.
too clean, it's nasty. And so I think even with AI, I was thinking about this recently about how it'll now become where it does not matter if it's factual or not. Did it move you? And so I'm like, okay, so then as artists in whatever capacity online, that's kind of our job. It's like, did it move you though?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh God, I fucking hate AI.
Don't get that's a separate
So
conversation.
that like we need another hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anywho, we're getting to end of time. Does anyone have any questions for Walela? Drop them in the chat or forever hold your peace. Not to make another religious reference. Um, but in the meantime, Walela, is there anything that you want to share? Anything that we didn't get to talk about that you want to touch on?
We talked about a lot today. It was really fun because for me, I haven't been able to like share these newer ideas that I've been having. So just I'm really just grateful to have the opportunity to do that. Just I think as an author, it's really important that we continue interacting with the work that we've put out there in mass media. So I'm just super thankful for that. So yeah, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for being here and for the generosity of your time and,
Of course.
your work.
Yeah,
If people are going to be lame and not ask any questions.
that's all good. I'm pro autonomy of the spaces. Y'all can just chill.
We want people to feel included.
Yeah, I know. I
Like,
feel
I'm a
it.
facilitator too.
You know what? I feel you. I feel you. I think sometimes with people when I facilitate, I'm like, y'all don't have to say anything. Y'all don't have to do nothing. It's fine. Somehow that pressure is just cool. But yeah, I also will be that person in the chat that's like, I had a question. I'm just too shy.
Yeah.
So y'all are welcome to DM me at any point
Yeah.
too.
I love that. My friend is a therapist in training and when she like mediates group therapy, she's and everyone's silent. She's like, "So what is this silence telling us?" Like
And I love when it gets silly like that because then I can just like let up a little bit.
yeah,
Like,
no, exactly. All right, I'm gonna call it. Thank you again so much, and I will share the recording and all of those fiction recommendations over email.
yeah, thank you so much.
All right, bye everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day.